All right, Chance, let's get right to it. Quick story for you. Right around the time the All-Star news came out, I'm doing the pregame show with Sam LeCure, and we had just done a segment about Andrew Abbott. As we transitioned to a different topic, which happened to be Nick Lodolo, I said something like, okay, now to the Reds' other lefty. And after we finished the segment, Sam said, he looked at me and he said, wow, I didn't think we would ever refer to Nick Lodolo as the other lefty for the Reds. And it clearly, on my part, wasn't meant to imply some ranking or pecking order. But Abbott had an all-star first half, so we talked about him first. We're still talking about Andrew Abbott. But we also have to talk about Nick Lodolo. He didn't make the all-star team, but there is a huge significance to the first 3.5 months of his season so far. Why is that?
I don't know that there's a pitcher who's just more of a different guy in a different stage in terms of where he's at and what he's doing than Nick Lodolo right now. And it felt like he had kind of been leading up to a complete game like he threw the other day. It felt like something he had earned through the checks or through the steps he'd taken and through the boxes that he'd checked. And to be honest, I wasn't that surprised that he's kind of having a breakout stretch right now.
Yeah, it's been a breakout stretch, but there's a lot to it in terms of how it's developed, how it's evolved, and it kind of culminated, obviously, in D.C. with the first 9-inning complete game of his career. We're not done with that topic, but first, let's say this. Welcome to Power Stacks. As always, we're proud members of the Growler Podcast Network. Coming up on the show this week, the clock ticks and the question persists. What will the Reds do at the trade deadline? We got Brad Meador to speak for the front office, Emilio Pagán's take for the team. Also, from the hot corner to a corner outfield spot. Maybe what to make of Noelvi Marte at the moment. And they say play to your strength. Is that still the Reds' rotation? Is it still a strength? What does it look like? We'll dive into that topic. But first, to finish the thought on Nick Lodolo, I think you and I both essentially had the same conversation with him at different times about what made this season what it's becoming so far. Aside from the complete game, what that start in D.C. did was on July 23rd, tied his career high for starts. On July 23rd, bested his season total for innings pitched in his previous seasons with the Reds. So he blows through both of those numbers still with, a few months to go in this season. That conversation, though, for Lodolo starts with his offseason. What did he tell you?
Well, first, let's just go back to the fact that there have been two Nick Lodolos before this season. There had been healthy Nick Lodolo, who is truly one of the best top-performing left-handed pitchers in baseball. But more often, we were seeing hurt Nick Lodolo, and it was, I believe, the back in early 21 and went on the 60-day IL after pitching through it. The calf, 22, the calf in 23 that he tried to pitch through and pitch around and was kind of a shell of himself because he couldn't push off his leg. Last year was a blister issue that turned into a finger issue that turned into a sprained finger that he tried to pitch through, and he wasn't nearly himself because of that. So it had been one or the other. Heading into this year, though, he was healthier than he had ever been, so he was able to change his training in a significant way. And while as a pitcher, he wasn't top Nick Lodolo yet, between April and June, he was the steadiest, most consistent, most reliable version of Lodolo that we've seen. All he was missing was some different mechanics and feeling different. He hadn't quite found that breaking ball yet, so I think we both knew once he found that breaking ball, we'd see some good stuff.
Yeah, talking to him about health in the offseason, Terry Francona said the same thing. There's a difference between just being healthy for the season and being healthy to prepare for the season. So all the things you just listed, so many times his offseason wasn't healthy. He couldn't train the way that he wanted to. And I think that in combination with identifying all of the things, guys learn their bodies. He's learned his body, how he needs to manage and take care of it, and how he needs to train it, not only in the offseason, but in season. So he had the healthy offseason to train and prepare. And now he knows the routine and the work that he needs to do maintenance-wise between starts, it's all come together. I love the fact that you said it felt like it was building towards a start like he had in D.C. He'd gone 7 the start before. It did feel like it was building towards that. And it also feels now like it's continuing to build towards a higher and higher ceiling. During the game broadcast, he was probably in the 5th or 6th inning, and I think he struck out 4 in a row at one point, and the Cowboys said, hey, get used to this. If he stays on the path that he's on and figures it out, you're going to see him have some games with some big strikeouts. Now, the strikeouts hadn't always been there this season in a big number, but you can see where it's going with Nick Lodolo, and that's why a first-round pick, a college All-American, that's why you never looked at when he got here and thought that he would be anything other than one of the top members of the staff and the rotation.
So Nick Lodolo's thing has always been his breaking ball. Like, that's what he does, right? The back foot breaking ball, we've seen it a million times where he hits the guy. Like, I remember in 2019, Cal Farmer, still a catcher, went on a rehab assignment and caught Lodolo and was like, this guy's Chris Sale. So, like, the breaking ball is the foundation for who he is. And one of his strengths earlier in his career had been his ability to be a strikeout pitcher. Then in 2025, for kind of some weird reasons that were hard to put your finger on, no pun intended, for a guy with blister and finger issue history, breaking ball wasn't snapping. Like, it was solid, and he was using it a lot early in counts. He was pitching backwards. He had ways to use it, but he wasn't finishing with it. That just wasn't there. And I remember kind of when he was at a low point statistically this season, maybe his ERA was the highest it had been. I kind of went up to him, say, hey, man, been a bit of a tough season. Like, I did that whole interview. And he said, you know what? I feel great about this season. He was very, very adamant about that, even though that's not how I was viewing it yet, because he said, I haven't had the breaking ball, but I'm still producing. Like, his ERA wasn't in the 4s. Like,
exactly.
He was still doing pretty solid, even though he basically had one arm tied behind his back with the finish breaking ball that he was missing. And so that's been the thing. All right, how is the breaking ball evolving and trending during the season? I remember vividly, he had one against Tatis against the Padres a couple weeks ago. It's like, okay, there's one. Juan Soto against the Mets, swinging out of his shoes for strike 2. I believe then he took strike 3 on the breaking ball as well. Lodolo stunned maybe the most polished hitter in the game with that pitch. There's strike 2. And then, of course, strike 3 was Lodolo continuing to build on that breaking ball. All the pieces came together, and frankly, I just think they're going to stay this way as long as Lodolo stays healthy.
We're going to circle back to the rotation later in the show, but we had to start with Nick Lodolo because of the start Lodolo had in D.C. It was spectacular. It was outstanding. In the leadoff spot now, I said the clock continues to tick, and it does. Trade Deadline at Palooza was a masterpiece of podcasting excellence, I thought. And if you haven't heard it, go back and listen to it. It made Chaz smile. He smiled the whole show. He loved that. Now we're closer to the deadline. We hashed out a lot of things on that show, but as we get closer to the deadline, update me on your thought, what you feel and hear from the front office, and what this might look like for the Reds.
Coming out of the break in New York, talking to people publicly, talking to people privately, and I think too, like, Terry Francona made a point to say it publicly, talking to us. They not that they believe this team can win a World Series right now. That's not what I'm saying, but they believe in this team. And there's a lot more tangible belief in this team than there was, say, the 2024 Reds at this point last season. And while the win-loss record isn't as good as it was at this point in 2023, I think it's a lot closer there when you just feel the belief on what they think this team actually is, not on paper, not theoretically, like in reality, how they feel about this group. Now, they'll all say it. They want the record to be better. The record needs to be better, much better, for the Reds to accomplish their goals this season. But they feel strong and comfortable that this is something they can build upon and not something they have to tear down and start all over. And that was important context for a team that easily could have pivoted towards doing not a fire sale, but with so many guys on expiring contracts going that route. So we now have a very clear path of where they're at. They're not going to be super sellers. They're not going to go all in. They're not going to trade top prospects, but they're comfortable in putting this group in the bye, let's see where we can go category.
Yeah. Well, the first two series post All-Star break, it was kind of a microcosm
tale of
of what
two
the
halves,
season.
yeah.
It's what the season's been. And it was a 500 trip. You had some really high moments in New York in winning 2 of 3 there, and then you circle back to DC and lose 2 of 3 there. So how does the front office see the up and down, the back and forth, the right around 500 nature of the Reds?
And that's the point I neglected to complete. Bad job on my part. Yes, then they followed up that Met series by doing, frankly, the thing that they've done too much this season. You look at that first week of May, you look at that Rockies-Marlins stretch where I think Pagán described it as shooting themselves in the foot. And then against the Nationals, just an opportunity where the Reds have to just be a better team. I think it's as simple as that. We could pin down this area of the team, that area of the team. The Reds just have to be a better team in those moments and raise the level. But it continues to trend in a neutral, and I think when you look at kind of the way they won those Mets games, net positive direction. Again, not towards all in. And I know it was just a 500 road trip, but I think it's still status quo plus which is where this group is at. But during the Mets series, I did talk to General Manager Brad Meador, asked some of the questions on my mind. You know, they were coming off a big win. They had another. Then, yes, they dropped a few to the Nationals the next day. But I feel like things are in a similar spot. Let's check in with Brad Meador about how he feels about the Reds heading into the deadline. What do you think of the first half of the season?
Well, I wish it would have been more consistent. I wish our record was better than it is. But I think, given as young as we are and the change in, manager and coaching staff and the time that it took at the start of the season for kind of figure some of that stuff out, all things considered, I'm not surprised by the way it's played out, and we're playing better, and hopefully we continue to move in the right direction and be able to push in here the second half and be better.
Let's cut to the chase. Do you plan to be buyers or sellers?
I hope to be buyers. I mean, it's like I told those guys, we still have 10 or 12 days, whatever it is, left, and we're certainly looking and talking to every team and trying to figure out how we can, in the short term, help this team. At the same time, we're not going to, hurt ourselves long terms by, selling our best prospects. And we're not doing that. We've talked about sustainable success here and what that means, and in order to do that, we have to be able to focus short-term and long-term at the same time.
Safe to say then, with that in mind, that, well, you could definitely get a rental. It wouldn't be, say, going all in for rentals. Something.
No, and I'm not saying we're not going to trade anyone. We're willing to do that. No, we just have to be smart about it.
How does the cluster wild card race impact the trade market?
I think it does. I think there's enough teams that are close enough that, everyone's kind of waiting a little bit longer to see which direction they're going to go, because by the nature of the wild card now and having more teams, in that group, maybe it plays out a little bit longer. But at the same time, we're, like I said before, we're talking to each team, and if there's something we can do sooner rather than later, we would be willing to do that, just to try to, help us between now and the deadline, and then see where we are.
The theme of the offseason around the league was big leaguer for big leaguer moves. Are we still there as a league, or can we get back to some more maybe prospect for big league?
Well, I think it'll be both. It'll be both. I think you'll see prospects move for sure.
Do you have much payroll flexibility?
We're still working through it. We'll have a better idea as we get into next week.
So working through it, we'll see.
Working
Payroll is ultimately going to have a very, very, very underrated impact on this deadline, as we covered in the trade deadline at Palooza. But I think the theme is, like I was saying earlier, and earlier I was probably using a bit too much of an upbeat tone, but status quo seems to be where they're at. Let's look for modest improvements in areas where they've been looking for modest improvements for the last 2 years. Bullpen, outfield bat, stuff like that. Feeling positively about the trajectory of this team. A key is, Brad alluded to this, but I've called it like the scheme change. playing Francona baseball as opposed to David Bell baseball, which are radically different styles. Feeling optimistic about how that process is going, giving this group a chance to build on that, looking for ways to supplement that without changing that significantly. Kind of like a cautious place to be, like we were saying on trade deadline of Palooza as well, but that's what they feel works best.
The series in New York was such a high for the Reds after being off for a few days for the All-Star break. They come back, Tito made the point about the day before workout, and everyone was there and everyone was excited and wanted to use that and that opportunity to start the post All-Star schedule in a big way. And they did. They won the first 2 games in New York. It was an emotional high for this team, and we've seen a few of those this season, but it was the timing of that coming out of the All-Star break. People had time to think about the season and what it is and what's coming up with the deadline. When they won those 2 games in New York, Emilio Pagán was on the mound to close both of those games out in front of 42,000 people. He pitched extremely well. That's what he's done. High-intensity situation. And as soon as he's done with one of those games, he's talking to Jim Day on the field, and as part of his post-game interview, he drops something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing, of we want to continue to play well, and we want to entice in some way the front office to add pieces to our team. We want to show them we're good enough so that they'll add at the deadline so that we can be the playoff team and have the second part of the schedule that we hope to have. He just walked off the mound. I'm not saying he didn't mean it, but there was some serious adrenaline pumping through Emilio Pagán at that point when he said that. And everyone took that as, not everyone, some people took that as he's calling out the front office. He's demanding that the front office add something to this team so that they can be better. When things cooled off some, I circled back to him in D.C. and asked him about that. And he kind of smiled when we started the conversation. He said, I think maybe it was taken a little bit more seriously than it was. All I meant was this. Here's what he said when I followed up with him in D.C.
Everybody goes into the year hoping to be a winning team and get into the playoffs. And if you get to a spot where, the organization thinks it's smart to go get somebody, then great. And so I wasn't trying to ruffle any feathers or anything. It's just, we came into this year with a goal of being a winning team and getting to the playoffs and doing something special. And so that's where that came from. And, we're definitely confident in our group, and, hopefully, we can do something exciting and do something special for Cincinnati.
I think it came off as that it was born out of confidence and excitement for what's happening.
Yeah, hopefully that's all I meant by it. I've got a great relationship with our front office, and those guys have been awesome. I know they want to win. It's been very obvious to me since the first time I spoke to them during free agency before I signed here. They like our group, and I know they want to win, and so that's all it is.
Now, he didn't back off the sentiment of what he meant, because I think people love that. We love to hear that. Hey, we're a good team. Let's go get something and make this even better, and let's go on a run. We all love that. He didn't back off that sentiment, but if it was interpreted as calling out the front office for some inactivity or inability to help the Reds or unwillingness to help the Reds, that's not what he did. Now, all we have to do, Chaz, is wait a few more days and see what actually happens.
Now, I think they are showing, again, that they want to win. Now, win what? All right, let's put
Go back to trade deadline at Palooza. There are different avenues.
But putting Noelvi Marte even part-time in the outfield is a very much win now move, because what's best and most valuable for the Reds long-term is having Marte as a third baseman. Let's give him a shot. Let's develop him. Let's see what he can do. Let's do what I call, the 2022 Jose Barrero plan. That's what a rebuilding team does. What a team that's trying to win does is puts Marte in right field because you don't trust his throws, and that helps strengthen your lineup against left-handed pitching. So, calling up Chase Burns, DFAing Jamer Candelario, even not making a bullpen move the other day and having Martinez available in the bullpen. I believe that was game 2 or game 3 against the Nationals when the bullpen was taxed, to make sure that you keep your best 8 up in the big leagues. They're signaling that yes, they are trying. Now roll your eyes at that. I get that. And there's a cap to that as well when you look at their staunch stance. We will not put top prospects in trades. Now, it's probably a reflection that this isn't the year the Reds are going to win it all. But that is circling back to my initial point that I started all this off with, the optimism coming off the Mets series, a reflection of the Reds do believe that they want to give this team a real shot. And that's the position they're in.
We're going to transition to Tito's take, and you took us right there with where we're headed with the Marte move, because you and I both know this. Mid-season position moves, they're tough to pull off. I'm not saying they don't work or can't work, but they're tough to pull off. And at the very least, they're almost always met with some form of resistance. Someone, the player or a player who's being moved as a result of the proposed move, any of that stuff could happen. So Marte going from third base to right field. Terry Francona reiterated in D.C., we're not turning him into a right fielder only right now. The move is about putting out the best defensive team that you can put on the field, having defensive flexibility with that also. And that's where they are with Marte. And so the one start that he made on the road trip post All-Star break, he had one ball hit to him, one ball to right field, and he made an excellent throw to the plate. Does that mean it's all going to be fine? No. Does it mean it's a disaster? No. All of those things are still in play, but I think the whole thing goes back to your take of the motivation behind even giving it a look right now plays into the context of where the Reds are.
Well, in the very short term, yes, if Marte can play the outfield at all, Marte in right and Espinal third is a better defensive combination than Marte in third and Espinal in right. And now the billion-dollar question is balancing development and winning. Prioritizing Marte's development would be having him at third. Prioritizing winning would be having him at right. So the more that the Reds do that, the more that they play that card. Brad Meador also caught my attention when he said it also gives us some more flexibility at the deadline. Because if you had a third baseman, you have that flexibility with Marte. Also long-term considerations, or maybe short-term considerations, with Sal Stewart. Now, Sal has really struggled since he was called up to AAA. It's been like a week, but you get the point. I mean, like, it's not like Stewart's going to be here tomorrow, but he's coming, and he's a big piece of this future as well. And the Reds' big weak spot organizationally is organizational outfield depth in the corner spots especially. So I think it makes sense in the long term. It makes sense in the short term. I wasn't surprised by it. But it still was notable to see, hey, is that Marte out there? So right after that happened, I went up to Collin Cowgill. Here's Collin Cowgill right after was that Noelvi Marte? Talking about this move and what it does for the Reds.
Well, I mean, it's just another option for us out there. Especially against a lefty, it gives us a chance to put SB at third, just like get all our righties in there. So, and you've seen him play, man. He's a good enough athlete, I think, to get it figured out. He's got a cannon. So he's got all like the physical attributes. Just now it's just maybe just brackets in just in case we need it.
And with the sprint speed he has, could he play center?
I think so. Oh, yeah. I mean,
he is doing a great job, but
yeah. I mean, I think like maybe that's down the road, get him comfortable out there in the grass. But I mean, he reminds me a lot of like when I had Julio Rodriguez early on in AA, and I begged him to let me put him in center, and finally we were able to just because of the qualities that he has. And he might be a tick faster than Noelvi, but like the instincts and like the way he's moving, like there's baseball stuff in there, So I think with Noelvi, it's like he's got that kind of instinctual ability to play baseball. So I think like anywhere out in the grass is going to be fine.
He has the arm strength. From a throwing perspective, can the outfield kind of help him too?
I think so. That's what we were just talking about. It's like there's obviously fear of making mistakes on throws, but he doesn't have to harness it as much out there, So there's a play at third and he's in right field, maybe someone's tagging, like he has no fear of overthrowing it or cutting it or whatever it is, So I think there's some freedom, to let like that arm strength really come to life out there. So like I said, it's the first day after him out there, but it's exciting to think about what the possibilities are out there for him just because of who he is.
And Marte's a guy who is a good also snapshot of what this Reds season is. It's funny, like I remember in January I made two lineup spreadsheets, one with if CES, Benson, and Marte can play, and one if they can't. And at the time, then on opening day, CES made the team. Benson and Marte didn't because they were viewed. They weren't big league contributors at the time. And now it's flipped. Now Benson's in the big leagues, but if you're ranking those three, Marte's the guy playing every day. Benson's a bench guy. CES is in AAA. So it's all just a reminder as you work with young cores that things can change quickly. One adjustment can unlock another move and another piece of the roster. And this is why building around young cores is so fluid, because how much stuff like this can change on a dime. Just look at Noelvi Marte.
Time now for the Reds' milestone moment of the week. And you know what that is. It's going to be Nick Lodolo's complete game. He had the rain-shortened CG earlier this season, but the 9-inning shutout, 4 hits, Chaz, no walks, and 8 strikeouts for Lodolo, 105 pitches. It was kind of a masterpiece. It was fun to watch. He was very much in control, and I think we both agree there'll be more milestones similar to that one for Nick Lodolo in the future. And this week's Reds milestone, as is the case every week, is brought to you by Glenville Ave, the baby blanket designed by parents who wanted something better. You got to check out the website. It's GlenvilleAveLLC.com. GlenvilleAveLLC.com. What makes these blankets better? If you're looking for a gift, if you need it for your own child, anything like that works. They're softer. They're safer. They're hypoallergenic. They're dyed with skin-safe colors because, of course, we all know our children, your children, deserve the very best. It's 28% larger than standard blankets. It is built to grow with your child. You can celebrate milestone moments with your child and give this as a gift and allow others to do the same. Glenville Ave. Be sure and check out the website. And when you do, use the promo code STACKS. You get 10% off your first order. We appreciate the support of Glenville Ave. And if you'd like to do something similar with us, powerstackspod@gmail is the email address. We'd be happy to partner with your business the same way we do with great supporters of the Power Stacks community like Glenville Ave. Moving now to Charlie's notebook, and I said we would circle back to the rotation, so let's do this now. And any conversation with the rotation starts with this question: what about Hunter Greene? What about Hunter Greene? He is the cornerstone right now that is missing from the Reds rotation. The update is that if things go well the next few days in Arizona, depending on when you're listening or watching this show, he's going to join the Louisville Bats next week on the road, and that begins in earnest what the Reds hope is a path back to Great American Ballpark and back to the Reds rotation. But Chaz, until that happens, where do we stand?
Hunter officially started his rehab assignment clock yesterday, 2 scoreless innings in Arizona. That means at a bare minimum, the Reds expect him back in the next month. Now, certainly that could be sooner, but again, at least putting him on the rehab assignment does make an official clock that there is some point where it has to happen, at least in the Reds' mind, which is notable considering there was 0 timeline for Hunter Greene seemingly a week ago. But now what can you expect from him? Especially for a guy who's already had several setbacks. Also in 2023, Hunter and Lodolo are both out right at this point of the year. Lodolo ended up never returning. Hunter came back and he really struggled kind of until the very end. He picked it up, but inconsistent, not to his standard. When he came back off the IL in August and September, I asked my question to Brad Meador, a part we didn't hear on the show, is I said, do you learn anything from that in terms of what you can expect from pitchers coming back from the IL at this point of the season and how that might impact your trade deadline plans? You know, like in 23, Hunter Greene wasn't quite Hunter Greene when he came back. So my question was like, what can you expect and how does that impact your planning? And Brad answered this question in a fascinating way. And I get it completely because it kind of is a dumb question to ask. Like, what do you expect from Hunter Greene when he comes back? Brad literally said, we think Hunter's one of the best pitchers in baseball. We expect him to come back and join our rotation. That is the plan. So again, that is what the Reds are operating under. There is uncertainty, questions. Why have there been so many setbacks? Will the setbacks continue? Will Hunter be Hunter right away? None of this is guaranteed, as 2023 showed, but the way the Reds are operating, and I get this, the way they kind of have to operate because of how good Hunter is and because no matter what, he'll be in the rotation if he's healthy enough to pitch, they are operating under the fact that Hunter will come back and be pitching at a high level.
It's a great plan, and the Reds certainly hope that's the case. Terry Francona said recently, about timelines and plans. He said, we just want him to be okay, implying the same thing that Brad Meador said, that if he just gets here and he's healthy, we believe in him and what he can do. As it stands now, you have the all-star Andrew Abbott, the budding star Nick Lodolo, the jack of all trades Swiss Army knife Nick Martinez, Brady Singer, who struggled clearly his first time post-all-star break, but he's going to take the ball and he's going to go out there and throw. And then you got Chase Burns, who, Charlie, was one strike away in D.C., one strike, not one out, one strike away from a quality start with 10 strikeouts. Now, it blew up into what it turned out to be in Washington, but he was having another one of those kind of games, and he almost wiggled off the hook. The thing that stood out to me, and I don't know how much he's voiced this before or not, but he mentioned post-game, I had some fatigue. I was just fatigued. Was that one game? Was that one inning? Was that the first effect of him pitching on a major league rotation and the workload being different than he's had to manage in the past? It didn't get that specific, but we're going to find out, because the Reds are going to keep sending him out there because he gives them a very good chance to win.
So originally, when the Hunter Greene timeline was earlier, kind of before the first setback, that was the thing, right? Like, all right, how quickly can you, and this was discussed, move Nick Martinez to the bullpen? They call it a rover role. Maybe he piggybacks on Burns. Maybe he piggybacks on any starter when it's an up game, because he's just as good as any reliever in the bullpen who they'd trust in those situations. But all that now is out the door, and you don't even have the insurance right now of maybe having Carson Spires help piggyback, manage, long man, all that type of stuff. That was a real possibility. That was a real consideration until Spires' latest setback. So that puts more on Chase Burns' plate, and they're continuing to cycle through the rotation. And every time they cycle through, it's a challenge that Burns hasn't faced before. Now, this most recent start was a bit different because, it was coming off the long All-Star break, and they bought him the extra time by putting him in the 5th spot there. But the plan is to be mindful of buying Burns extra days and opportunities where they can. And sure, like, he'll pitch on 6 days rest this week because they have an off day. But then they don't next week. So, he'll be pitching on 4 days rest in Bristol, Tennessee. We'll see. Like, there are going to be all these things down the road that could add up. How do they manage that? Can they manage that because of where the rotation depth is right now? That's an important plan the Reds have to develop.
No question. As they approach the deadline, how highly does the rotation register on thoughts about what may or may not be possible or necessary from a trade deadline perspective?
So I'll add in one more thing. First, the fact that Chase Petty's been struggling, and that Brian Van Bell, while he's doing nice, like, they didn't get Van Bell to be a part of this rotation. And then Spires had a setback, and Miley has a nice little road ahead of him to get back on the big league mound. So actually today at Bengals training camp, someone asked me about the Reds and the deadline. I was trying to explain, and they asked about the rotation, and I was trying to explain where the rotation's at. And I said, and now I didn't say this part, this is where the Bengals were in December of last year. I said, when your line's banged up and you're like one injury away from things being like really bad and really scary. That's it. Let me edit that. Like, that kind of did happen because then Cody Ford got sick, and then Devin Cochran had to start against the Titans. And my thoughts on Devin Cochran have been well established on our sister podcast. It's a scary place to be when you have to protect Burrow, but you're one injury away from not having linemen. Not saying this about Devin Cochran, not having enough linemen who belong on an NFL field. Anyway.
I don't want to lose you down the Bengals rabbit hole, okay? I see you heading down that way.
2021, the Reds season ended because Miley was banged up and then shut down with an injury. Gutierrez was gassed, went on the IL. They ran out of starting pitching.
Right.
2023, they ran out of starting pitching. Brett Kennedy, Michael Marriott. They were rolling out Andrew Abbott, even though he probably needed to be shut down in retrospect. 2024, they were buyers at the deadline, but they were still holding on hope. But then that road trip, Toronto, Pittsburgh, I want to say, like Greene, Abbott, Lodolo in like a week all got hurt. They ran out of pitching, and then they had like Fernando Cruz pitching 3 innings, like season ended because they ran out of pitching. The Reds are in a dangerous spot from a pitching depth standpoint right now. Now the long-term rotation's fine, but a question you might hear is, will the Reds trade Nick Martinez? I don't think they can afford to trade Nick Martinez because, again, where they're at from a depth standpoint. My take is, and I'm planting this flag pen here, the Reds need to trade for a second Nick Martinez. That is my biggest need at the deadline. So pitchers with real versatility. My favorite, he's kind of fallen out of favor in LA, hasn't quite worked. He needs to throw more strikes, but is Reed Detmers. A lot of team control, still upside to start, or upside to be a real versatile, dynamic bullpen piece with upside. Reed Detmers, I like. Michael Soroka is another guy who has a similar skill set, who also has just had success as a pure reliever, but has bet on himself as a starter this year and has looked the part. There's stuff to work with there, and some nice pedigree as well. Zach Littell, Jeffrey Spriggs, Michael Lorenzen's on the IL right now, but what I saw was he was just expected to miss a start or two. So what you'd be doing with those guys would essentially be getting a reliever, or at worst, a piggyback partner for Chase Burns, who in late September could just be a 1-inning guy for you. But also when there's another injury, because those do happen, that guy is your 6th starter now, gives you some Hunter Greene insurance, or it gives you insurance for whoever could get hurt, gives you some insurance that Chase Burns, who knows, gets fatigued, runs out of gas. Who knows what the second half of Chase Burns' season is going to look like. I love the idea of adding insurance with true late game setup upside as well.
Sounds like a plan. It's not going to wow anyone.
Yes.
People are looking for wow at the trade deadline. That's not going to wow anyone. But could it help the Reds? Could it help the Reds? Absolutely, it could help the Reds, because I'm with you. All of a sudden, most of the starting pitching depth that you counted on, it's just not there now.
Let me add to that real quick. Like, this is an interesting way to frame it. Are you looking for someone who will carry the Reds at the deadline, or are you looking for someone who will save the Reds at the deadline? And the Reds need to have been in a spot where they were in a spot to be more aggressive, where they could go out and get that final piece, that cherry on top, someone, as we talked about on Trade Deadline Palooza, impact your World Series odds, not your playoff odds. Get that type of guy, whether it's a rental, whether it's a long-term, whatever it may be. That's a tough sell for where the Reds are at right now. But what they can do is make sure the season doesn't get away from them. Bet on the young guys by giving them their best shots to hit on their upside, which is the name of this game anyway. Again, does that represent a successful position to be in at the time of the trade deadline? No, you needed to be in the division race now. But you're not. You still can save the season from spiraling away by adding depth in this way.
Looking ahead, the Reds get back home, and there's a nice long stretch here at home before you go to the last great Coliseum, they call it, Bristol Motor Speedway, for that game. It's the Fishbowl. But the teams they're going to see the Dodgers at Great American Ballpark. They're playing teams like that. It's been well documented. The Reds down the stretch, or the rest of the way, have, by opponents' winning percentage, the most difficult schedule in baseball. You're watching other teams around you. Not that the division is certainly still, if things went crazy, the division, you always want to say, I want to win the division. But now you look at Milwaukee, and Milwaukee has gone crazy and now has the best record in baseball. The Cubs are still the Cubs and have had a good season. But you just look at what the Reds have in front of them, and it's going to be tough, but it starts again at Great American Ballpark. And we see where it goes from there.
The Reds are in a spot where they just need, like we were talking about earlier with Nick Lodolo, the strength of their team to carry them. The lineup, it's come and it's gone, and there's been good and there's been stretches where and why can't they take the next step? But only what they built is a strong top of the rotation. Heck, look at the series in Washington. Why'd they lose those games? Sure, they didn't score enough in game 2. That's obvious, but Game 1, Brady Singer, bad day. Game 2, I felt positively about that game by Chase Burns, but, comes out in a bad final line. What they need is more games like Wednesday where a starter just goes out and carries them. That hasn't happened enough. Abbott's had some of them. You've seen them from Lodolo recently. Those haven't preceded that, but if they can sustain, that'll be key. Obviously, you need some more of that from Singer, from Burns. Martinez has his, but has another step that he is capable of taking, I think. I think what you need is this rotation to start leading the Reds to more wins. Now, is that an unfair thing to ask? Yes, but that is the strength of the team, and you need to live and die with what your strength is ultimately. And that's kind of what my focus is going to be, is some good offenses come to town this week.
We shall see. Email us if you so choose. powerstackspod@gmail is the email address. Thanks for checking out the show on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to producer Kent. And we'll see. We're getting down to what they call the dog days, or the nitty-gritty. The trade deadline is near. For all the latest, keep it right here with Power Stacks. Chaz, good work. We'll see you next time.